While millions of Americans are screaming at their TVs every Sunday, wearing jerseys, painting their faces, and letting the outcome of a game dictate their mood, there's a quiet group of people who feel absolutely nothing. No excitement, no anger, no emotional investment at all. And if you're one of them, you've probably been told, directly or indirectly, that something is wrong with you, that you're boring, that you just don't get it. But neuroscience tells a very different story. Not caring about sports isn't a personality flaw. It isn't a lack of passion. It's a sign that your brain is wired differently in how it processes reward, identity, and meaning. And once you understand what's actually happening inside your mind, you'll never look at sports obsession or your own indifference the same way again. In American culture, not caring about sports often comes with an unspoken social penalty. When you say you didn't watch the game, people assume you're disconnected, unenthusiastic, or somehow missing a core part of what it means to belong. Sports are treated like a universal language, and opting out can feel like refusing to speak it. But here's the reality almost no one talks about. Indifference to sports is not indifference to life. It doesn't mean you lack intensity, loyalty, or emotional depth. It simply means your sense of excitement, meaning, and connection isn't automatically triggered by vicarious competition. The problem isn't you. The problem is the assumption that passion only counts if it looks loud, tribal, and televised. To understand why sports matter so much in the United States, you have to understand how deeply tribal this culture still is. Long before stadiums and TV contracts, belonging to a group was a survival mechanism. Your tribe protected you, fed you, and gave you an identity. Modern sports simply inherited that role. Teams became symbolic tribes tied to cities, states, family traditions, and even masculinity. When someone watches their team play, their brain releases oxytocin, the same bonding chemical involved in trust and attachment. Neurologically, it feels like loyalty. It feels like family. But not everyone experiences that pull with the same intensity. Some people have weaker tribal instincts. Their identity isn't anchored to groups, logos, or shared enemies. They don't need collective symbols to feel whole. Instead of asking, "Where do I belong?" their brains are more focused on, "Who am I as an individual?" And in a culture built so heavily around group allegiance, that difference can feel invisible or misunderstood. What really locks people into sports obsession isn't loyalty or tradition. It's chemistry. Every game is a perfectly engineered dopamine machine. Dopamine is the neurotransmitter of anticipation, not pleasure. It's the same chemical that fires when you pull a slot machine lever, check a betting app, or wait to see if an investment pays off. Sports deliver that hit constantly. Every drive, every possession, every close call keeps the brain suspended in uncertainty. And uncertainty is the most powerful trigger of all. Psychologists call this intermittent reinforcement, the same reward schedule that makes gambling so hard to stop. Brain imaging studies show that watching your team activates the same reward circuits involved in other highly addictive behaviors. The brain doesn't really care where the dopamine comes from. It just learns that this activity is worth repeating. But for people who don't care about sports, that loop never fully forms. Their dopamine systems simply aren't activated by watching other people compete. There's no chemical hook, no craving, no emotional pull. And without that reward signal, obsession never takes root. This difference goes deeper than personality or upbringing. There's growing evidence that part of it is biological. Not everyone's brain is built to respond the same way to competition, risk, and vicarious reward. Research in behavioral neuroscience suggests that variations in dopamine receptor genes influence how strongly someone is drawn to competitive spectator activities, including sports. In simple terms, some people's brains are more sensitive to the dopamine spikes that uncertainty and competition create, while others barely register them at all. That means your complete indifference to whether a team wins or loses may not be a conscious choice. It may be the result of how your reward system is calibrated at a genetic level. This isn't about willpower, intelligence, or taste. It's about neurodiversity. Different brains seek stimulation, meaning, and emotional payoff in different ways. And once you understand that, the idea that everyone should care about the same things starts to fall apart. Another major psychological difference shows up in how identity and self-esteem are regulated. Sports fans often experience something called basking in reflected glory, or birging. When their team wins, they say, "We won." That victory becomes part of their personal identity. When the team loses, the language shifts. It's suddenly, "They lost." This subtle pronoun switch protects self-esteem by borrowing success and distancing from failure. People who don't obsess over sports are far less likely to engage in this kind of identity borrowing. Their sense of self is more internally anchored. They don't need external victories, performed by people they've never met, to feel competent or successful. Their self-worth is less tied to outcomes they can't control. That doesn't make them emotionally detached. It means their identity is more consistent, less reactive, and less dependent on symbolic wins to feel solid. At this point, it might sound like sports fans are just emotionally driven and non-fans are somehow colder, but that's not what the research shows. In fact, many sports fans score higher on certain measures of empathy because they regularly practice caring about the struggles, failures, and triumphs of others. The difference isn't whether empathy exists, it's where it's directed. Every person has a limited emotional budget. People who don't care about sports tend to allocate that empathy elsewhere. Instead of investing emotionally in athletes and teams, they pour it into personal relationships, creative work, social issues, art, ideas, or intellectual challenges. Studies have found that low sports interest is often associated with higher openness to experience and a stronger appreciation for beauty, meaning, and complexity. Their emotional highs come from depth rather than spectacle. The empathy is still there, it's just being spent on different parts of life. At the deepest level, this divide is really about how people experience meaning. Sports offer powerful narratives. The underdog, the comeback, the rivalry, the dynasty. For many Americans, these stories feel meaningful because they're unpredictable and emotionally charged, with clear winners and losers. But for people who don't care about sports, that randomness feels empty. They struggle to emotionally invest in outcomes they can't influence, performed by people they don't know, in games that don't materially affect their lives. Instead, they find meaning through direct engagement. In building something, creating something, learning something, or deepening a relationship. Psychologists describe this as the difference between parasocial investment and lived experience. Some people are fulfilled by watching stories unfold. Others need to be inside the story to feel alive. And that preference shapes how present they feel in their own lives. Because of that preference for direct engagement, many people who don't obsess over sports report feeling more present in their everyday lives. They're not spending hours emotionally riding the highs and lows of events they can't influence. Their attention is anchored in their own challenges, goals, and experiences. This isn't about being productive or morally superior. It's about how time and energy are experienced. For some, watching a game is immersive and restorative. For others, it feels like borrowed emotion, lived secondhand. There's something quietly radical about choosing to invest your limited attention in your own life rather than outsourcing emotional intensity to a screen. It's a different way of relating to time, struggle, and meaning, and one that often goes unnoticed because it isn't loud. So if you don't care about sports, you're not missing a fundamental piece of the human experience. You're not broken, detached, or boring. Your brain simply operates with a different calibration. Your reward system, your sense of identity, and the way you assign meaning are wired in a way that prioritizes direct experience over spectacle. And that difference matters. The next time someone asks if you watched the game and you genuinely couldn't care less, remember this: you're not disengaged from life. You're engaged in a different way. And if this resonated with you, you'll want to understand why quiet, introspective people process the world differently, and how that difference can be a real advantage.